Okay, so what is up, my fellow developers? And in this video, we are going to be using MongoDB and a Node application. Before we get into it, I'll put a link to listen to this in the description, but come and download Postman. It's an amazing application that will make our routing and requests so much easier to test. So, let's get into it. Okay, so at this point, you should know how to start with the basic Express server, have the app file, have the server file, and I showed you in the last video how to connect to MongoDB. The only thing we're going to do differently, since we're using a shell, is create a database local variable in the config file and say MongoDB ://1270001:27017. We're going to say /games. This little end part right here just points to the database that we are going to be using. And in our server, all we have to do is say process.env.database local, and I have it say database connected in the promise so that we know we're connected. So our first step is to create a outline for our collection documents, and we're going to create a folder and we're going to call it modals, and inside of that we're going to say modals.js. I just goofed that up, didn't I? There we go. Modals.js. Cool. Okay, so since we're going to be talking to the database, we need to import Mongoose, or require Mongoose. And I'm just going to start typing and saying what I'm typing. At the end of this file, I will tell you what everything is doing and explain it then. But just follow along for now. See if you can't make sense of it as we go. So, let's create a variable, call it const game schema. We're going to say equals new mongoose.schema with a capital S. We're going to say parentheses, curly bracket, and now we're going to start doing some fun stuff. We're going to say name, colon, curly brackets. We're going to say type, string. We're going to say required, true, comma, a game must have a name. I'm going to copy this real quick. Actually put a comma behind that, and then copy, and we can paste it twice. And right here, we're going to change name to price. This type is going to be a number, capital N, and then a game must have a price instead of a name. And this last one is going to be a rating. That's going to be a string, and then we want to change this to a game must have a rating. And then after this, we're going to create another variable. We're going to say const games with a capital G equals mongoose.modal with a capital M. First parameter is going to be our games, and the second one is going to be that variable we just created of game schema. And now all we have to do is say module.exports equals games. Okay, so you might be wondering what's going on in this file. Well, to start off, we're requiring Mongoose because this is how we're going to talk to the database, and we can't just talk to the database without it. It'd be way too complicated and complex, and it'd be a headache, and you'd want to jump into traffic. And now, right here, we are creating an outline, or a little blueprint, if you want to call it, for the documents we're going to be putting into the database. And we're saying name, which is our key, and the value for that is unknown. We don't know what it's going to be yet. So we're saying parameters. We're going to say whatever the value for this key is, it's going to be a string, and it's going to be required. I spelled required wrong, so let me fix that. So you don't have to give this required parameter right here. You can just leave that out if you want and just say type string, but then that will not be required to be filled in when you go to send a request and add that to the database. So if we left this without this required statement, we wouldn't have to put a name property in there or a name value. We could just leave it blank and the database would accept it. But since we have this, we need that. And down here, we are, in this variable, we are creating the modal itself. And this first parameter is going to be the collection we put it in. So just like the shell, that we used in the last video, if this collection doesn't exist yet, then it'll create it for us, but if it does exist, it will insert our documents into that collection. And then this is just the specifications for the type of data going into our document. And we export it because we're going to want to use it later on in a different file. Okay, so real quick before we move on to the second part of this, I made a little typo right here in modal. After mongoose dot, it should be a lowercase m, not an uppercase. So save that real quick, just in case you were getting an error somewhere. That's what that was. So now that we did that, the next step, after you save it of course, is to create a controller. So we're going to create a new folder here and call it controllers, plural. And we're going to put a document in there called game controller.js. The only thing we're going to need to require in this file is that modal file that we just created. So I'm going to say const games equals require. We're going to back out of this folder, go to our modal, and then go to /modal. Cool. So just like the last one, I'll explain after everything. But we're going to say exports.get all games equals async request and response. We're going to give a little arrow function right here, and now we're going to use a try and catch block. Put error right there, some spaces so it's pretty, and create a variable called game, and we're going to say that equals await games dot find. Now we're going to say res dot status 200 dot json parentheses curly brackets, and then we're going to say status colon success comma results is going to be the length of game, so game.length, and then we're going to say data colon curly brackets game. And then in this catch block we are going to say res.status 404.json, and all we have to put in here is status fail, and the message is just going to be the error. So what's going on in here? Well, the first thing is, since we're connecting to our database, we need to use that file we just created in our model to connect to it and properly talk to our database. So that's what we're doing right here. And then this async is just saying all of this is going to be asynchronous. It's letting us know and JavaScript know that whatever happens in here, it's going to step away so that while it's waiting, it's not blocking the event loop and stopping our application in its tracks. And that's what this await means too. It's just saying game is going to be awaiting a promise, whatever that promise may be. And then just like in our shell, when we were trying to find all of our documents by using the .find, we're following that up with of games. And this probably looks a little weird, this res.status. Well, you want the res here because this is going to be the response. And this status 200 is telling the browser that, okay, this went well. We got what we wanted, which is why we have a status of success. The results is just going to display how many documents are in a collection, the number of documents. And this data right here is just going to display what our documents are. So it'll display the name, the rating, and the price of each document. And if you can guess, in this catch block, it's saying, oh no, we have a 404 error, it failed, something went wrong. And that shouldn't be 344, it should be error. So let's save that and go to the next step. Okay, so for the next part of this process, what we are going to be doing is creating a route folder. So we're going to call this routes. Inside of that, let's create a file called game routes.js, and of course we're going to want to import that file we just created. So I'm going to say const game controller equals require // and since we're going to be communicating with the browser, we need to use express. So import that. First thing we're going to do in here is create a variable and call it router. We're going to say that equals express.router. And then down here we're going to use that. We're going to say router.route is a forward slash, just forward slash in quotes. And we're going to chain that and say get game controller dot get all games. And we're just going to export this router real quick. Okay, cool. So let's save that and jump over here to our app file. In here, just like we have been doing, and below express itself, we are going to require that game routes. So const game routes equals require dot forward slash, or nope, just dot forward slash. Come down here to routes, and we're going to say game routes. And just above the export of app, we're going to say app.use forward slash games, and then games route. So what's happening here? Well, of course, we're importing this file, and we're saying, I'm going to use Facebook, for example. Let's say you go to facebook.com/games. Well, in this game route file, we're letting the browser know there is certain things we can do on that /games page. We can use this get method, first of all. We're going to add some more to it later, but whenever we go to the games page and just / nothing following it, one of the things we are allowed to do now is use a get request. So let's save this. Okay, so now let's test out this route and see if we're properly connected to the database and if we can get any documents we have from our collection, which we shouldn't get anything because we haven't inserted any documents into there yet. But open up this Postman app we just downloaded, and up in this corner, I want to click New and HTTP request because that is what we are doing. So, where it says enter request URL, we're going to type out 127.0.0.1 colon 3000, and then we're going to type /games, and that is where this comes into play from that app file itself. Now, if you notice right here, make sure this says get. There's a bunch of other methods we can use, but we want it to be on get. We're going to press send. So, like I said, we don't have anything in our collection yet, so this is going to be empty, but we see the status says success, and up here we get that 200 that we typed out into the status code too. Awesome, so now let's add a post request so that we can add data to our database. Okay, so to create a post request, we're going to come back here to this get control or game controller, and we're going to do the same thing as up above. We're going to say exports dot, we're going to call this create game equals async. I want that request and that response. Give it a nice arrow function. And then we're going to say try. Give it the catch. Pass error. And the first thing we're going to do that's different is this variable is going to be called new game, and we're going to say equals games dot create. I'm going to say rec dot body, and we're going to say res dot status 201 dot json. Say status success. And then we're going to say data. We don't have to add the results. We're going to say game, new game. And then down in this catch block, we are just going to say res.status 404.json status fail, and then the message is going to be the error. Okay, so in here, you're going to notice one of the first things that's different is when we created the document, we are putting request.body in here. So all that's saying is in the request, because the client is sending the request and we are sending the response, we are going to get the body of that request, and that's what we are going to send to our MongoDB database. And this 201 this is also a good error code. That's just saying that we sent data and we didn't just get data. Like up here, we sent data and it worked. And if we added results into this part down here, it'd throw an error, and that confused me for the first time when I started using MongoDB and NodeJs, so we can't add the results. But we're going to save it and come back to our game routes, and we're going to chain this onto our last GET request. So we're going to say dot post, we're going to say game controller dot create game. Cool. So let's save this and use Postman to see if it worked. Okay, so we have Postman back open, and now we want to test this request out we just created. So, like I showed you, instead of using get, we're now going to use post. And this request also works in the /games URL. We're going to click body right here, click raw, and switch this text to JSON. So open up your curly brackets in here, and everything that we had for the keys was required. So we're going to say name, I'm going to call it Call of Duty. These games are ridiculously expensive, so I'm going to put price, and I'm going to say 100 for $100. And the rating, of course, is going to be M. So press send on that, and if it worked, we should pretty much get the same exact message as last time. And it worked. We have a success status code here, and it says 201 created. So let's switch this back to our GET to make sure our GET request is properly working and it's sending us the data back. So click GET up here and click send, and voila, there we go. We have our new document added into this collection, and it created the ID for us. So I'm going to go over all of this one more time just to help wrap it up. So of course the first thing we're doing to use our Mongo database is actually connecting Mongoose to Mongo, and just to make sure we're saying console log that database has been created. But this modal, this is the first thing we do. We create a blueprint or outline for our documents being put into this collection. And then that schema we create, this says new because every time game schema is specifically called, it'll create a new schema. But we're exporting this games right here so that it knows to go to our games collection in the games database. And over here in this controller, we're requiring that information about our database. And each one of these methods we create is going to be its own type of request. This one is a GET request because it says .find. This is a create, and so that makes it a post request. These are asynchronous. You don't want to block the event loop in Node.js, otherwise you're going to destroy your whole program pretty much, because if the application has to specifically wait for this part, it can't move to that next step. So if we had other stuff going on besides just this, it would pretty much crash or stop everything in its tracks. But thanks to asynchronous programming, this kind of steps aside from the main portion of the code and gets its answer and then comes back in to Node. So after we create the controller, we have to create the route. If we wanted to, right here in this, we could say /API /da/da/da, and whatever. And then anything following games would have to be followed up by this URL route in order for us to use these requests. But we're importing this game controller because we want to use the methods we created. We are importing Express because we're going to be communicating with the browser, and it gives us these awesome little tools like router right here to shorten our routes down to actual readable, understandable things instead of it being 50 lines of code. All of it's practically 9. and we're exporting it so we can tell the app file, which deals with the main gist of everything going on the server URL-wise, that hey, in / games, watch out for specific requests, and if you get specific requests, you can react accordingly thanks to all the commands we created and the game routes, which is thanking the game controller, which is thanking the modal. And that's pretty much it. In the next video, we are going to be creating updates so we can send a request to update our documents, and we are going to be deleting documents. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you learned something new. Have a great day, and peace out.